So we all have an inner critic, right? That voice in our head that tells us we're not good enough. My next guest wants you to quiet that inner critic, even question it, so you can stop second-guessing your goals and go after them. Studio 5 relationship contributor Dr. Matt Townsend is joining me. Why are these negative voices, Matt, so powerful?
Because they are like, they just haunt us, and they stop us, and they plug us up so we don't offer our greatest offerings. They drive our fear, they drive our anxieties, they drive everything that we don't like about ourselves. I bet comes from a voice inside of us. And sometimes we don't even know which voice to follow. I've had people like not know if they should marry the person of their dreams because they feel fear. They feel weird. And I'm like, well, yeah, okay, that's normal.
Yeah,
that's okay. So what else do they feel? And we're going to show you today how you can actually discern what the voice is and if the voice is the healthy voice or the haunting voice.
Because it's not to say all of the voices in our head, all of those many voices, they're not all bad. Sometimes they're there to guide us, to shape us, to direct us, to inspire us, prompt us.
Very valuable voices. And some of them come from essence, as you've heard me talk about, and some come from ego. And the egoic voices are really more after control, and the essence voices are about helping you be the best you can be. And you have both of them in there, so we got to get rid of the ghosts that don't matter.
Speaking of those ghosts, you do something a little silly.
Yeah.
You name them.
Yeah.
You name your voices.
You got to name your ghosts. You got to name the ghosts that are haunting you. You don't need to name every ghost, but I have a ghost, for example. I am so super optimistic that I think I can do anything and everything. And I can do it, and I can do it in a small amount of time. So when I actually notice that my optimism, my blind optimism is starting to enter into like a business discussion, like I can get that done. I hear, what's the deadline? Sure, I can have it by this afternoon. I actually try to recognize that voice inside my head that I can do it, because that is a voice that's actually not helping me. I call him blind Mr. Magoo. Because he's just blind optimism. You know how Magoo would like walk around and almost die every second?
Happiest dude.
Happiest dude in the world. So when some of us have pessimism, some of us are just like negative naysayers, so name it. Some of us that have a little depressive gene, and we see that depression start to come in to our conversations, name it. And what they're finding out in the research is if you name it and say, oh, the Dementor's here, the Dementor's there, then you've actually kind of owned that thought process in your head, and it actually helps you start to recognize it earlier. And the faster you can recognize some of these voices, whatever it is, the perfectionist voice that you have in your head, the pleaser voice that you have in your head, whatever it is, name it. And if you make a name that you can kind of own and control, then it puts the voice in a different position in your head.
So you said these voices, these ghosts, can either haunt us or help us. How do we determine and decipher which?
You got to listen to it, right? And so some great work by Tammy Moore. She wrote a book called Playing Big, and she talks about how we can hear the voices and see the voices. There's a very simple way she suggests that you can recognize the voice. If the voice is optimistic, if the voice is solution-oriented, positive forward, moving you to get better at something, that would probably be a healthier voice that I would listen to. If it's a frantic, frenetic, fearful, scared voice that's doing nothing but kind of making you feel less than and weak, then it's probably not the voice you'd want to follow. Your ego is not there to make you feel like you've got choices going forward. Your essence is. And so a way to tell it is if at the very end of you sitting there thinking, like let's say somebody had a chance to come on your show and to be one of your guests, they'd be terrified, some of them. I mean, some of them, like I'm terrified every time.
Well, don't make me out to be that big of a monster.
No, but it's just a scary thing on TV and everyone, and you got to look at it. So some of the voices might be saying, oh, you can't do, you couldn't even be in your play in high school. Do you remember when you ruined those 3 lines and your mind starts thinking about these things and it's not helping you be better, but the healthier voice would be saying, you know what, okay, this is a big deal. This is a big step, but you can do it. You can move on. Remember a couple things. You got to remember to do this. Let's make sure we have enough sleep. Let's make sure we get this. So if the voice is telling you what you could do to make it work, then you're probably in the healthier area of your brain instead of the weaker kind of scared area.
Moving you forward, yes. Moving you back, no. Do we need all of these voices, Matt?
No. In fact, honestly, you probably don't need most of them. And most of them didn't even come because you necessarily wanted them. Some of them are just ghosts of the past, and some of them were created when you were maybe a little less, educated, less skilled. When you were a little kid and you didn't feel as adequate, you may have created one of these ghosts, and you still bring it with you today. You may have noticed that mom or dad kind of brought in some of the perfectionism to you, and we're always asking you, do you think you can really do that? Should you really do that? And that may have been the ghost. So I want you to start to evaluate, is this a ghost? After you go through each one of them and you find them and you start naming them, does this serve me? Does it serve me to have the perfectionist in me? And be careful, because even when you listen, because it's going to fight like crazy, and then choose if you need the voice or not. And if you don't need it, then we probably need to fire it.
How do we fire it?
This is the coolest thing in the world. I would literally sit down and I would talk about Mr. Magoo optimism. And there's a positive, healthy optimism that I can have, and then there's a realistic optimism that I need to pay attention to, okay? And there's the naive optimism that's blind. But I actually would sit down and I would write a notice of termination.
To your voice.
To my voice. Dear Mr. Depression or Magoo, if we're doing Magoo.
Let's stick with Magoo.
Dear Mr. Magoo, your services are no longer needed. I have instead decided to hire this voice for these purposes.
No, come on, is this a silly step or is there real power?
What you're now
there?
doing is you're now starting to actually think through and terminate the voice for what it is.
Okay.
I no longer need your services this way, this way, this way, this way. I know you tried to protect me as a child. I know your optimism is good because you want to be positive and uplifting to the world. I've also found that at times it disabled your abilities to say no. It disabled your ability, it increased your need to please and all of these other things. And actually literally think through why we need to terminate Mr. Magoo, the optimistic me or parts of me, or why you need to terminate the negative Nelly. Your negativism is impacting me this way, this way, this way for the long term, and because of that, we will no longer need your services, and instead we will be replacing your services with these things.
Do we hang on to that and revisit it if needed?
I would, and because then you'll have the voice come back, because this voice does not know it's fired yet.
Okay.
And so you'll have to keep telling the voice it's fired, and when you keep telling it and recognizing it, it will start to diminish in power. It might show up to every party, not knowing it's fired, but it will have less and less power over you.
Love it, Matt.
Powerful
Thank you
stuff.
so much.
You bet, bro.
We are getting excited about Matt's date night, which is coming up, and seats are flying as predicted.
We really don't have a lot of seats because it's a smaller venue. November 4th is the date at 7 p.m. Olympus Junior High. Go to datenightswithmatt.com. And if you enter in the passcode Studio 5, not Studio Cinco, Studio 5, you'll get a discount, but come to it. This is going to be all about how to bring happiness back into your home. So if you have some negativity, if you've gone through some tough stuff, bring in happiness home.
These are powerful events for you and your partner. We'll put the information on our website if you want to link over. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brooke.